Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. David Katz. Pleasure to be with you. I can't see you, but if I could, I imagine some of you are friends. So nice to be with you. Some of you, we probably don't know one another. Very nice to meet you. I hope you're having a great time at the conference. I hope it's an excellent experience for you, and I'm very pleased to take part. I want to thank Jacqueline Smeaton, who's obviously the host today representing Emerson Ecologics. I know she's extremely busy. She was going to be here to do the intro, but is tied up doing other things and will join us in just a bit. So we'll skip that and we can get right into the content. But I do want to say, first of all, on behalf of the whole team at Diet ID, we're really grateful to our friends at Emerson Ecologics for the partnership in general, opportunity to work together, and the particular opportunity to participate today. And the other thing to note is that, obviously this conference, this webinar celebrates the evolution of this platform with the addition of Welevate Labs. And of course, labs are all about measuring what matters. And I'm going to take that very same theme in a slightly different direction as I talk about the Emerson Diet ID partnership. So again, thanks for being here on a Saturday, late morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. It's afternoon here in Connecticut. And without further ado, anybody in the audience who's heard me speak before has likely heard me reference this paper. But I'm going to assume that this is a new group. And for those of you who don't happen to know this paper, it isn't overstating things to say that it altered the trajectory of my entire career. And personally, I consider it arguably the single most important entry in the peer-reviewed literature in the modern era. I certainly commend it to your attention. I think it's extremely important. The timing of it is what made it so influential on my career. I finished my training in internal medicine in 1991. I finished my training in preventive medicine, public health in 1993. And if you note the date on the slide here, actual causes of death in the United States was published in 1993. In fact, it came out in JAMA between my graduation and the time I sat for my board. So really that pivotal period when I was a newly minted preventive medicine specialist and asking myself, okay, now what? What am I going to be when I grow up? And initially I thought, I think as so many people inclined to research, think I'm going to try to ask new questions. I'm going to boldly go where no one's gone before and do research and answer those questions. This paper changed that thinking. So essentially, in Actual Causes of Death, Bill Foege and Mike McGinnis enumerated the underlying modifiable root causes of the things that wind up on death certificates. And that tale, those of you who've ever filled out a death certificate know this story as well as I, but essentially mostly this is done by sleepy medical residents in the middle of the night. If it's done in daylight hours, it's very busy medical residents bustling by, and there isn't a great deal of thought. So somebody dies of heart failure, it is secondary to myocardial infarction, maybe multiple infarctions, which in turn is due to what? Well, what you wind up capturing on a death certificate is atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries. Effectively, you run that gamut, and what it tells you is heart disease due to heart disease due to heart disease. There's really nothing there of any great utility. How do you prevent that from happening in the next person? Doesn't tell you. But McGinnis and Foege did. They said, no, actually, those are the proximal causes of years lost from life lost from years. We actually can identify the underlying root causes that are modifiable, and we can change all this. And so they enumerated a list of 10 factors, which effectively explained all of the premature deaths in the United States every year. And by extension, by the way, this is somewhat ethnocentric, of course, but by extension, the modern world, because the epidemiology of industrialized countries is much the same all around the world. So this could just as easily have been the modern world. What captured my imagination and changed the trajectory of my career was the fact that 80% of the action, years lost from life lost from years, was clustered in the first 3 entries of the 10. And those 3 entries were tobacco, poor diet, and lack of physical activity. I've referred to them for the past 30 years nearly as bad use of feet, forks, and fingers. But those really are the master levers of medical destiny. Address those 3 things, you can produce an 80% variance in the total burden of chronic disease, premature death. So basically, getting that memo as a newly minted preventive medicine specialist, I said, I can't spend my career boldly going where no one has gone before, because where we've already gone is enough to eliminate 80% of premature death and the misery associated with chronic disease. I have to devote my career to turning what we already know into what we do, because knowledge isn't power unless you do something with it. And we clearly weren't doing enough then. And by the way, as you all know, we're not doing nearly enough now either. But I'm among those, and some of you are among those who've been trying. Maybe all of you are among those who've been trying. We have a long way to go, miles to go before we sleep. But that was the idea. So everything I've done, my clinical care for 30 years, my research at Yale, was all about translation. Taking the knowledge we have and turning it into the power of routine action. And again, the fact that we haven't yet won that war doesn't mean it's the wrong war. It just means we have to keep at it. So that was the story 30 years ago. If we jump ahead the better part of 3 decades to August 26, 2019, we get another installment in this critically important message about the power of lifestyle factors over medical destiny. This was an op-ed in the New York Times by Dariush Mozaffarian, whose name will be known to most of you, Dean of Nutrition at Tufts, and Dan Glickman, former Secretary of Agriculture of the United States. And what they pointed out in this op-ed, entitled, almost as provocative as Actual Causes of Death, Our Food is Killing Too Many of Us, is that diet is now the single leading risk indicator for premature death in the United States, full stop. The number one cause of premature death is poor diet quality. And we're not talking about hunger. We're not talking about the aspects of diet that are tangled up in difficult social determinants, things that we haven't yet figured out how to fix, or at least haven't mustered the political resolve to fix. Now, we're talking specifically about the quality of diet for people who do have access to food. That is the single leading predictor variable for premature death today. So back in 93, feet, forks, and fingers, and it was fingers that was number one, tobacco, because so many fewer people smoke today, and because diet quality is so much lower than it ought to be, and because everybody eats, diet is number one. And by the way, I can't help but digress to note the pandemic, and obviously that being the preoccupation of our time. We had a national moment of reflection and mourning when the pandemic toll traversed 500,000, and rightly so. But poor diet quality, something over which we exercise complete control, claims more than 500,000 lives prematurely in the United States every year. This is the pandemic that was always here. This is the pandemic that isn't going to end anytime soon. This is the pandemic that hides in plain sight, and truly pandemic, because this focus again is on the United States, but the same trend reverberates around the world. So diet is now number one, and that's starting to shake up the House of Medicine. A few months after this op-ed in 2020, this paper came out in Circulation, a flagship publication of the American College of Cardiology, joint statement by the ACC and the American Heart Association saying that given that diet is the single leading predictor variable, diet quality, for all-cause mortality, and most of that mortality is related to cardiometabolic disease, it is incumbent upon cardiologists to assess and address diet with every patient. By extension, I would argue it's incumbent upon all of us in the health professions to do that. But cardiologists were the first to come around and formally declare diet should be captured in every patient encounter, if only we had the tools that would allow us to do that, because capturing diet intake is just a bit too onerous. And again, this is not just a U.S. problem. We sadly, we've been very effective at exporting ultra-processed food around the world and corrupting diet quality everywhere we can for massive profit. And so the Global Burden of Disease Study has looked at leading causes of death and morbidity around the world in this paper, as you see, looking at dietary risk factors in 195 countries. And globally, in the developed world, poor diet quality is now the leading predictor variable for premature death and the principal cause of chronic disease. Not the only cause, but it's number one. Really quite incredible. So a massive tragedy, a massive travesty, and a massive opportunity if we could do something about this. There's a famous expression. I keep looking up the source of this, and I keep finding it attributed to different people. So I've given up. I don't know who said it. There's a short list of people who always get credit when nobody knows who said it. I think Peter Drucker comes up on the list. But in any event, expression that comes from the world of business: we manage what we measure. And I think it's equally pertinent in the world of medicine and health, where the things that matter most we call vital signs, and we measure them very routinely so that we can manage them. We can know whether they're where they should be or out of range. If they're out of range, we have specific goals and we treat to those goals. Well, if diet is the single leading predictor variable for all-cause mortality and total burden of chronic disease, shouldn't we measure it routinely, as the American College of Cardiology now recommends? We should. But we haven't, and we haven't because it frankly is too damn hard. The prevailing methods to capture dietary intake that had been validated, you can ask just a few questions. You can do an unstructured interview that may take you 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, depending on how detailed. But the validated methods include food frequency questionnaires. Frankly, I confess this to you as someone who's devoted a 30-year career to nutrition. I've never managed to get all the way through one. I mean, they frankly make your eyeballs catch fire. How many times in the past 6 months have you had carrots, and how many carrots, and how many times you had bananas, and how big were the bananas? I mean, nobody can do this. It's just agony. So, that takes 60 minutes, 90 minutes. And, frankly, it's one badly remembered meal and food at a time. You can do a 24-hour recall where you talk about everything you ate yesterday. Very easy to distort that. Most people do. So notoriously unreliable, but widely used in epidemiology. Or you can write down everything you eat for 7 days, which of course takes a week, and then it first has to be analyzed. So 90 minutes to do a food frequency questionnaire, half an hour to do a 24-hour recall, maybe a little bit less, a week to do a 7-day food journal, and then first get it analyzed. These are all very good reasons why diet isn't measured routinely. So this was an impediment to a lot of things I wanted to do, a lot of what I wanted to do clinically, a lot of what I wanted to do in research. And I had an idea about a way to fix this, and am privileged to know, I suspect many of you, but who's who in the world of nutrition. And I called upon friends and colleagues: Walter Willett at Harvard, Frank Hugh, who is not shown here, but he was involved as well, Christopher Gardner at Stanford, Mary Murimi, Gail Frank, Linda Snetzlar, David Jenkins, whom you know is the inventor of the glycemic index. Just an incredible group that came together and helped me and my team turn a novel concept into a solution. And that solution is called Diet ID. And when this is all done, you can learn more at dietid.com, but you'll also see you can get all this directly through Emerson and Wellevate. The basic concept here, again, is typically when we're assessing diet, we are goading people to try and remember one eating occasion, one food at a time, and then establish the pattern of their dietary intake, one badly remembered food or meal at a time. The goal at the end of all that interrogation, whether it's writing down everything you eat or trying to recall what you ate yesterday or doing a semi-quantitative food frequency questionnaire, is to get a picture of the whole diet. That's what you care about. You don't actually care whether in the past 6 months somebody ate 182 or 183 French fries, whether they ate 27 or 26 donuts. It all comes out in the wash. Who cares? But you do want to know, do they routinely eat donuts? Do they routinely eat French fries? What does their diet look like? And what is an objective measure of their diet quality? So it occurred to us that we could reverse engineer the process entirely. What if we could establish a map of the world's diets, or starting with the United States, of dietary intake in North America, where we had on the x-axis diet type operationally defined, and we captured everything from paleo and low carb and keto at one end to exclusively plants at the other end, everything in between, flexitarian, pescatarian, Mediterranean, vegetarian, etc., all that stuff, everything everybody eats, ethnic diets as well. And then on the y-axis, we use the best validated measure of diet quality, which currently is the Healthy Eating Index 2015, and stratified all the different diet types into 10 tiers of quality. And then what if we populated every cell in the map, this type of diet at this tier of quality, with several days worth of eating turned into an image. And what if we then further translated that image into what we call a dietary fingerprint? And this is all patent pending innovation, where we capture just the smallest number of foods possible that will reliably track back to just that one cell in the map, so that we can play a game just like the game we play when you go to the eye doctor and look through this device. In the image here, a phoropter. So you don't fill out a lengthy questionnaire to say, here's how I think I see at different times of day and different kinds of light, to try and get your glasses to match your visual acuity. We're shown two images at a time, like these balloons here. And the question is, which of these is in focus, A or B? And you say B. And then we get two more images and they say, how about now? You've all played this game, right? And then they kind of home in until it's an exact match for your eyes in diopters. And thank you very much. I can see clearly now. We've done that for diet. That's exactly the process. Two images at a time, but the question isn't which is in focus. The question is, which of these looks more like stuff you eat, A or B? You say B, we say, how about now? And 60 seconds later, we've got you. 60 seconds. That's the typical experience. 60 seconds, we can do a comprehensive dietary intake assessment. The science behind this is very robust. So we've been working, before this ever saw commercial daylight, we were working for the better part of 5 years. In particular, Christopher Gardner, who was heading up the expert panel, had a team of dietitians. And what we were needing to do, first with them and then subsequently with my team at Diet ID, the team that works for the business, was for every cell in that map. First of all, we had to make sure the map was expansive enough. What are all the diets that people in the real world eat, in particular in the US, but we are expanding globally. So we had to do an epidemiologic surveillance project, essentially, to identify the range of diets. We had to determine the number of tiers that would be enough to give us a really granular assessment, but not so much as to induce choice paralysis. That's how we landed on 10 tiers of quality. Every one of the cells in the map had to be populated by our dietitians with a detailed 3-day meal plan standardized to 2,000 calories a day, for which at the back end, using NDSR software, we had a comprehensive nutritional analysis. So we have 150 nutrient intake levels relative to calories for every diet in our map. We can tell you the exact servings of every food, how many servings of fruits, how many servings of vegetables, how many servings of whole grains, on and on it goes. All of that for all of the diets. And then the what we call our culinary cartography team had to rework that into images that reflected the meal plan, but also looked realistic, the way people in the real world really eat. We did focus groups to kind of pressure test all of those. We had to adjust the diets if they weren't quite right with regard to the healthy eating index. We're not going to go. So that's probably enough. You want to know more, you can follow up with me afterwards. My team is happy to share all the gory details, but a lot of science. And again, we use the HEI 2015 to adjudicate dietary quality. We use NDSR to establish nutrient intake levels, and then to right size the diet. So after we onboard you, 60 seconds, this image or that, which looks more like stuff you eat, A or B, A or B, A or B, A or B, gotcha. We then ask you age, sex, height, weight, activity level, run that through the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation to get an approximation of your energy requirements. And then we right size that dietary pattern for you and say, okay, given that you need 2,372 calories a day to maintain your current weight, here is your diet type, operationally defined. Here is your diet quality, objectively measured. And here are estimates of up to 150 nutrient intake levels. Total fat, total carbs, total protein, saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, omega-3, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, everything, all the stuff you'd expect. And again, the experience for the end user is as simple as this. And by the way, we ask a few questions at the beginning that take just a few seconds. Do you eat meat? Yes or no? Do you eat grains? Yes or no? So we can drop you into the right part of the map. We don't drop everybody into the same place. If you tell us that you only eat plants, you drop into what we would call the northeast quadrant of our map. That's where the diets are plant exclusive. If you tell us that you do eat meat, but you don't eat grains, we drop you into the low carb or keto section and so forth. But we use those screener questions, drop you into the right part of the map. Everybody starts with 2 images. The app allows you to use a magnifier. So if you want to scrutinize the component foods or meals, you really know exactly what this image is made up of. and then it's just an either or. And this is really easy for older people to use. We've had many people over 80 and 90 complete this who are not particularly tech savvy, but it's also really fun for younger people. My understanding is since you're kind of swiping to make your choice, it's a little bit like Tinder and familiar to the millennials as well. So everybody is really happy with the functional performance. One of the deficiencies in modern dietary assessment, and in the Q&A, I'd be delighted if there's further discussion about this. But um, I think an important omission is the idea that there's just one way to eat right. So, for example, if you want to fix your blood pressure with diet, clearly you have to do the DASH diet. Well, yeah, sure, we know that DASH is effective for lowering blood pressure, but DASH isn't really a highly prescriptive diet. It's just a cleaned up diet that avoids junk, uses a lot of wholesome plant foods, and provides a low intake of total sodium. The most effective version of DASH was the DASH dietary pattern coupled with sodium restriction. Well, there isn't just one way to achieve that. What if you're Mexican American? Can you do that and honor your cultural heritage? Hell yeah. What if you're South Asian, Indian American? Yeah. Chinese American? Absolutely. So we thought it was really important to capture a range of ethnic diets. And this slide says we are expanding our offering because we're always expanding our offering. A diet map can evolve. You can always add details. You can always extend the boundaries of your map. So we're doing that all the time, adding therapeutic diets, in particular, though, very focused on adding ethnic diets. And ultimately, we want to globalize the tool. So, it's one thing to add a Mexican American diet so that Mexicans living in the US find themselves in the diet map. It's quite another to deploy in Mexico, where you might want to capture all the regional variants. Similarly, we have a couple of South Asian diets, but to deploy in India, we would need a wide range of regional Indian diets, and we will develop that over time. But for now, lots of ethnic diets, and they work not only to onboard people, but we also use this tool to identify goal diets. And so we have those same 10 tiers of quality for a Mexican American diet. So, let's say you want to fix blood pressure or lipids or weight, but you want to stay true to your ethnic heritage and the way you're used to eating. Well, then we take you up that column to an optimized version of that familiar diet and show you how to get there from here. So really excited about the continuing expansion of the map with a wide variety of ethnic diets. It was recently called out, by the way, in the New York Times, that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is way behind on that issue. I think the article in the New York Times was something like, is the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics too white bread? Meaning, the idea that everybody needs to eat the way the typical American eats, and clearly not. We can't talk about personalized nutrition if we don't mean it. If we don't mean, we're going to meet you where you are and help you optimize the kind of diet that you and your family actually feel you can live with. So for the end user, really simple, this, image-based experience, and within generally about 60 seconds, you've got your answer. If you use the full suite of functionality, we provide, where am I now, my diet ID, what diet is optimal for you, and we run the selection to get to a goal diet through two filters. I would argue that a lot of what's in the personalized nutrition space is a little early. You read the work of Christopher Gardner Diet Fits, for example, would suggest that we're kind of, the marketing for nutrigenomics tends to get a little ahead of the science. But what are the filters we could use for personalizing nutrition that clearly are ready for prime time? Well, one would be, what do you want diet to do for you? I mentioned DASH for hypertension, but the diet used in the DPP, low carb diets potentially for managing type 2 diabetes, anti-inflammatory diets, plant exclusive diets for regressing coronary atherosclerosis, on and on it goes, right? Lots of therapeutic diets, as well as the opportunity to say, we'll produce a therapeutic diet within an ethnic pattern so you can eat the way that's comfortable, but at a much higher quality level. So one thing is, what do you want diet to do for you? That's one filter. The second filter is, given all the options, let's say you want to lower blood pressure. Yeah, DASH can do it, but so can an optimal Mediterranean diet or pescatarian or vegetarian or vegan. So which of these looks like a way of eating that you could live with, not just for 6 weeks, but forever. So we actually run the selection through those two filters. The diets that are lined up against specific health objectives using the weight of evidence in the peer-reviewed literature personal preference is personal preference. You tell us, you're the boss. And then we can help you identify a goal diet. And then for the clinician, it's a very detailed dashboard. So again, we can present this any which way. Like we have a wide variety of clients. Some are very nutrition sophisticated, some are not. Some want a really simplified dashboard. But we can report out all the different nutrient levels, all the different food servings, how they line up against the RDAs and DRIs. So, we won't drill down and look at the specifics in the slide, but you see those red indicators, green indicators, those show whether specific nutrients for a given individual using this platform are in the recommended range or out of the recommended range. We can track change in diet quality over time. And by the way, we can track change over time without any food logging. We just repeat this 1-minute assessment. And at any given time, we can take where you are today, subtract where you were last time, and show the delta down to nutrient levels. So, I've been working with you for a month. Let's look at how your fiber intake has changed. Let's look at how your added sugar intake has changed. We can track all of that. So clinicians get a really detailed dashboard. And again, this is populated in real time. Your patient can do this at home. They can do this in the waiting room. They can do this with you. It'll take a minute or two. And then all of this gets updated. And this is customizable. And really good experience with deploying the tool to date. I think ultimately what matters to busy health professionals is, what do I get out of this? So, per the case I'm making, we get critically important information, right? We manage what we measure. Diet's most important. We've got to have a means of measuring diet uniformly, universally, and efficiently. Well, we now do. So I would argue massively better information, massively more efficiently. And the information includes operationally defined diet type, objective measure of diet quality, HEI 2015 score, nutrient intake levels, food servings. But the end user experience is really good. So I mentioned we've had 80 and 90-year-olds use this. I actually did a segment on the Dr. Oz show during the pandemic to talk about nutrient effects on immunity. And at the end of the segment, Mehmet asked me about Diet ID. We talked briefly about this. And because I knew in advance we were going to do that, we made we're a B2B company, but we made it available to everybody on our website so they could do the assessment and compare where their diet was to what was optimal for immune function related to pandemic defense. Well, the traffic broke our server. It was overwhelming. So we had our tech team scrambling to get the servers back up so they could handle the traffic. We had many thousands go through, and we had the demographics. And, this was the daytime TV audience. Many were older people. The completion rate was 96%. I mean, this is just easy for everybody. Even when people are completely tech incompetent, it gets completed in less than 5 minutes. Anybody who knows anything about using an app, it takes about a minute. In addition to validation, which I'll talk about momentarily, we ask everybody who uses this to rate their comfort. So did we get you? How close did we get to what you think your diet really is? And we're consistently above 90%. So people feel like, yeah, you heard me, you got me, this is me. And again, the population that can use this extremely diverse, just about anybody can. I think the other things that matter to busy health professionals, time, money, efficiency in the workflow. So, we can integrate this into electronic health records. We do all sorts of things that make it easy for clinicians. As you're about to see, you in this audience can access this directly via your connection to Wellevate. And that's, as I said, a partnership we're particularly proud of. But what we find when we look across our ecosystem of clients, time is saved because either you're not getting dietary information at all, which is a real deficiency, or you are, and most of you probably are. But if you're just asking questions to try and get some sense of what dietary intake is, that information is pretty subjective, and you're generally spending 20 minutes, 30 minutes to do a decent job. I did this for 30 years, so I feel your pain. The idea that you can get any really a clear notion of an individual's dietary intake without asking questions for 20 minutes or more, I certainly never was able to do that. Well, we can do it in a minute. So you get those 20 minutes back. So we've had reports of massive time saving. And instead of trying to get the information and spending a session or two doing that, you have the information instantaneously and can start in on the solution. So it saves time. We've also seen that when clients use our navigation function, basically we're sending out daily actions to guide you from where your current diet is to your goal diet. So this is for people who've chosen not just to onboard, but to identify a goal diet. This is really personalized nutrition, by the way, because we know where you're starting, we know where you want to go. This is not generic advice. Here's how to improve your diet. This is advice that populates your personal route from your starting point to your goal, just like GPS. When you get a turn list on GPS, it's not the generic, here's how to get to, someplace. It's how to get from where you are to exactly where you want to go, one turn at a time. So we're doing that for nutrition, reaching people via text messages and email. And when this is done, we see significant improvements in diet quality, significant increases in fruit and vegetable intake, all the things we like to see. And all these slides that I'm showing, you're reading them as I'm talking, I'm sure, they indicate where these deployments were, what the kinds of populations were. So FitWorth was a citywide public health initiative in Texas where these data were captured. We also did a deployment with a large fitness chain. The interesting thing about this, it was holiday time of year. And despite that, almost half the participants lost weight, almost 9 pounds on average at a time of year when everybody is gaining weight. 2/3 improved their diet quality. Everybody reduced their intake of sugar as one particular marker of improvements in diet quality. All of our higher quality diets, of course, are extremely low in added sugar. So all the stuff you'd expect to see. One of the developments that we're very excited about is the opportunity to translate our ability to capture objectively measured diet quality effortlessly and at scale into enhanced knowledge about what is the ROI of food as medicine. And food as medicine, of course, can be digital coaching, it can be real life coaching, but it can also go to the extreme of giving people food, right? Meal kits sent to people's homes. So there's a whole range of interventions for food as medicine. And for all of them, what we want to be able to do is show, okay, how did we transform diet quality? And then what is that going to mean over time in terms of not just adding years to lives and life to years, but for the bean counters, what's that going to do to the bottom line? So we actually developed an ROI calculator. Happy to talk more about this in the Q&A. This is a tool we actually make available. Right now, it's a Google Doc accessible on our website. We're turning it into an interactive web page where you can plug in numbers for your population. You can adjust the assumptions. How much do you expect diet quality to improve? What's your time horizon? And what are you doing in your food as medicine program? Is it just digitized coaching? Is it more than how much you're going to spend? And we can show you how long it takes to get to ROI. And how great the ROI is. And for me, really gratifying, and it's a simple tool, and I think economists can certainly enhance it over time. Let's call it entry level. And by the way, this is in a paper that's currently under review for peer-reviewed publication. But extremely gratifying how quickly you get to an economic return on investments in food as medicine, and how great the monetary gains can be if you're holding the risk for population. So if you're doing value-based care, I think the argument for doing food as medicine interventions is extremely compelling. So follow up about this ROI calculator, most welcome. Happy to address this with many of you. I mentioned that we ask everybody their comfort level. Did we get you? But obviously, this is a group that cares about standards of scientific validation. So we've done the usual things. We compared this against food frequency questionnaire. There was robust correlation, far from perfect, but far from perfect is good when you're comparing yourself to a far from perfect tool, right? So we were actually looking. We wanted significant correlation, which we got. We also wanted to see some differences, which we got. And then we looked carefully to see, do the differences suggest that diet ID is better or not as good as, and the differences suggest that diet ID was outperforming the FFQ. We actually had a sneak peek at biomarkers. Diet ID was slightly outperforming FFQ for biomarkers. We did the same thing. Actually, an outside group did the same thing with 24-hour recall. And here too, the deviation, significant correlation, but some deviation. The deviation suggests, once again, we were outperforming the standard tools. 24-hour recalls consistently, because people can kind of pick their best day ever. Well, yesterday happened to be my best day ever. Coincidence. So that people typically overstate the quality of their diet and understate their caloric intake. When we looked at the details of the data here, the differences showed diet ID consistently identified a lower diet quality than the 24-hour recall. That's almost certainly correct. And diet ID consistently showed a higher calorie intake than 24-hour recall. That's almost certainly correct. What we're now doing is, we're evolving the validation scheme to include biomarkers. We have a study ongoing to include the 7-day food journaling. That's an online study we're running right now. Ultimately, we want to compare this against metabolic ward, but these things obviously take time, especially during a pandemic when you can't get people to come to metabolic ward studies in the first place. So we have a very long list of ongoing studies. We've deployed into currently at least a half a dozen NIH-funded studies around the country, and we're adding more of these all the time. If some of you are involved in research, we are happy to engage with you. And some of these deployments are actually done pro bono because we're interested in the data as much as we are in advancing the business. So we are in partnership with Emerson and Wellevate. So even before Wellevate Labs made it possible to capture comprehensive information about critical lab values and use those in real time, this partnership was in place so that it was possible to capture comprehensive information about dietary intake. And I have a few slides here to highlight how you can access this via the Wellevate platform. And Jacqueline, if you're available now, you can join me. There you are. Good to see you. And just turn on your mic and you can take over.
Wonderful. Yeah, we did get a couple people that asked, how can we access Diet ID through Emerson Ecologics? And you can visit it if you log into the your Emerson account under education in the resources section, like Dr. Katz has put on the screen here. You also can visit go.emersonecologics.com/diet-ID. And that page actually goes through how we suggest you use it with your patients and clients. It includes text that you might send through an email containing the link for the patient. And we gave you a couple of options. One is if you want to send it to a specific patient, like maybe post first visit, you can send it. It includes an explanation, it includes the link. Or if you wanted to do it for all of your practice, another way we've seen practitioners use Diet ID is actually to stimulate more visits by sending out the link, having patients go through the assessment, and then setting up a follow-up with you to discuss. So this could be a really great way to re-engage past patients who haven't worked with you for a little while by allowing them to actually see what their diet looks like, get a kind of scientifically accurate assessment, see where they're at on the quality scale like David described, and then realize, oh, hey, one, I'm like really deficient in magnesium and vitamin D, so I've got to figure out what to do there. And two, my diet quality, not so good. I should probably reconnect because I thought I was doing great, but maybe I really should be doing a little bit better. So that link again is go.emersonecologics.com/diet-ID. So you can check that out there, and that goes through and provides you with all the copy and everything, pre-populated emails, all that stuff to make it really easy to use. So we think this is a really exciting and innovative tool that all of you should be utilizing with your patients. It's so quick and easy. It allows you to do it at the initial visit and follow-ups where, patients can get real data on how they're doing and really that tracking. So are we open to taking a couple of questions, Dr. Katz?
Absolutely, Jacqueline. Thanks for taking us through that. And I'm seeing that there are some questions. So folks, it's been a pleasure. And Jacqueline, thank you. And again, we're really proud of this partnership. And Carrie, I suspect you're listening in. So just on the chat, a couple of people asked for that link that Jacqueline just shared, but maybe you can type that into the chat so everybody has it there.
The chat, I don't think the chat is turned on for attendees, but what we can do is when we post the link to the slides and the recording, we'll include the link in the description of this recording so you're able to view it there. So if you can't remember it or didn't catch it, we'll include it and send that out to you.
Okay, great. I guess I'm looking at the Q&A. But yes, Jacqueline, delighted to do some questions.
Great. So I think you've covered this, but maybe we can reemphasize. What's your experience been with patient compliance with the recommended diet, and does Diet ID kind of change that compliance level?
We think it does, actually. I don't have a specific figure to share because, frankly, we license our technology in different ways to different clients. Some of them are just doing onboarding. We have a very diverse ecosystem of clients. For example, one very large nutrient supplement maker, and their only interest is the onboarding. There is no dietary intervention there. They want to know what are nutrient intake levels at baseline so they can say, well, here are the things you're deficient in. Yeah, we've got products that line up against that. So that personalized nutrient supplementation, I really like that model. But we have deployed into intervention settings, and they vary too. Sometimes it's just us. and sometimes it's us plus a human coaching scenario. Both we've deployed into a digitized diabetes prevention program, and we've deployed into CHIP, the Complete Health Improvement Program at Spectrum Health. So, it's a little hard to say how much of the compliance, so-called, is due to us versus the charisma and skill of the health coaches, but it's very high. And yet we think it is higher because we're able to be agnostic about specific diet goals. So, for example, even in the context of the diabetes prevention program, which is at least as generic in the dietary recommendations as DASH, we say actually, there are lots of different variants on the theme of that high quality diet. If you want to be vegan, can you do the DPP and be vegan? Sure. If you want a Mediterranean version, if you are Mexican American, do you get to play, or do you have to eat the same diet as everybody else? Yeah, you get to play. So that personalization, that essentially we honor the theme of a particular intervention. What is it trying to fix? But we allow for personalization on the theme. So yeah, I wish I could give you an exact figure. If you want to follow up with me via email, I'm sure my team can chase it down. I don't have it at my fingertips, but as best we can tell, it's very high. And yes, we think it's higher than the standard because we're empowering people to optimize diet quality, but do it in a way that they actually like to eat. And rather than it's the same way for everybody. And by the way, that's also something that varies with clients. Some of our clients only want to offer a narrow range of goal diets. We can do that too, but sort of intrinsically, we're agnostic. High diet quality is high diet quality. It's measured objectively. There's a spectrum of options there.
So I think, I'd love to talk a little bit more about that, because one thing I think is so unique about Diet ID, and really, truly, you and your team have opened my eyes to thinking about this in a new way, is that learning nutrition in America, we learned a very ethnocentric view of nutrition where, it's like kind of a healthy American diet. That is how we learn what a healthy diet looks like. And I can imagine that that can be a huge barrier for, you know, anyone else.
I don't even think,
Well,
yeah, Jack, I think that's absolutely true. And I don't think we know how big a barrier it is, because when we look at, for example, what happens in the diabetes prevention program or, cardiac rehab, it's only for people who get engaged. So we don't know how many people we lose at entry who say, I'm not doing this because there's nothing there that looks like me.
mhm.
But then we also know that there are significant rates of attrition and people don't achieve and maintain the goals. And I think a big part of that is the failure to democratize high quality nutrition and say, we'll meet you where you are. You tell us what is important to you. There's going to be a way to optimize overall diet quality within that context. And together we can find that. I think it's a trend in nutrition at large, and it's overdue. But it's certainly a focus at Diet ID. And by the way, I did see in the questions, is this available in other languages? Yes, currently available in English and Spanish. But as we're increasing our deployments, we're increasing the languages. We have deployments in Canada. French is probably going to be next. But eventually, as we expand this around the world, we'll add other languages as well. But here in the U.S., obviously, the two principal languages that are crucial are English and Spanish, and we have the app available both ways.
Great. And I think one more question. If you are a practitioner who wants your patient to be following a specialized diet that's not currently represented in Diet ID, can you walk us through how a practitioner might take the results they receive and kind of translate that for their patient in the way that kind of meets their own unique therapeutic need?
Yeah, actually, I saw that in the Q&A too. Do you do specialized diets like a renal diet? So, if we're talking about a diet that can only be put together by, for example, monitoring an individual's electrolytes, you have a patient on dialysis, for example, that's probably a bridge too far, right? I mean, there may be no way to amplify that. That's a patient who's going to spend a fair amount of time with a highly specialized dietitian and team, customizing a diet and making frequent adjustments to make sure we got to take sodium out, we got to put sodium in, we have to adjust your calcium. So I think there are things that's probably too much to ask of this app or any. But on the other hand, we do address heart failure because that you can make personalized adjustments, but the general goals of a heart failure diet are pretty clear. So we have a wide range of conditions, and if the question is, can we add conditions to that list? Yes, we've done that many times. And by the way, some of those are medical conditions. Some of those are aspirational. So, we have some clients in the fitness space. So, we want to optimize performance. So, can you recommend specific diets that are about building muscle bulk? What if you got people who want to be particularly strong? Can you recommend diets for that? People who want to optimize their stamina and their recovery from, endurance sports. Can you recommend that? There's a literature on ergogenic effects of food. And so all of that's possible. Right now, we have a diet for low FODMAPs. We're right now looking at developing a diet specifically to manage menopausal symptoms. There's an interesting literature on, sort of optimal dietary intake at and around menopause. That's of interest to us. On and on it goes. So I think the list is potentially very long. We have a finite list now, but very often it's a practitioner or a client of ours who has a specific interest that gets us to add the next thing. If there is, and this is an audience, you all know the literature. If there is a relevant mass of evidence in the peer-reviewed literature linking specific health effects to specific dietary patterns, we can generally add that to what we do.
Excellent. Well, I think you've covered all the questions. Thank you so much. And I think, you may be thinking, why is this part of a day we're talking about labs and diagnostics? And I think that the reason why we really want to put this at the forefront is because there are tools and resources that are free for your patients, that are free for you to access, that can still provide data. And we really want to help you have a data-driven practice. That because we know that when you bring data forward to your patient, they're much more motivated to make changes. That's one of the reasons why we look at markers. We look at them to see disease risk, but we look at them to track progress. But it's also incredibly motivating for a patient when they have something that they need to change. So I hope that you walk away and take this and really put it into practice right away. Because like I said, it's free for your patients and something that they can really take action on, that specific data. So thank you so much, Dr. Katz. It's an honor to have you on
Thank
our
you, Jacqueline.
advisory board and to get the chance to work with you with Diet ID and to have you here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We love this partnership. And folks, it's been a pleasure. Great being with you this afternoon.